Markets today had the opportunity to be on the road. Today, we had the privilege of being part of the stakeholders who are invited to witness the launching of the Stanbic Bank Kenya Foundation. I have behind me the tagline for Stanbic Bank Kenya Foundation. It's all about partnering for growth. Stanbic Bank has been operating in Kenya for 109 years. Yes, that is how far and deep its roots go for. In this particular year, it has launched its foundation so that it can be able to give back to the community, engage with different stakeholders to be able to enhance the value addition to the community at large. The vision for this particular foundation is to be able to embed the operations of the Stanbic Bank Kenya Group for another 100 years, if not more. On the sidelines of this official launch, we at Markets Today, brought to you courtesy of me, Bithe Mwema, who is the host, and Metropole TV, we have the privilege of sitting with Mr. Charles Mudewa, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Stanbic Kenya. Thereafter, we also had a one-on-one with Ori Okolo, who is the chairperson for the Stanbic Bank Foundation. What were we able to glean? Our objective for our questioning was this: Stanbic Bank Kenya, COVID-19, what next for the business community, and how is this bank giving back? And also, from Mr. Charles Mudewa, earlier on, he kept giving us the narrative of Africa, giving us African proverbs, telling us what we need to look out for the future. When we sit with him, he will be taking us through the African story from his eyes. Thereafter, we have a one-on-one with Ori Okolo, who is the chairperson of this foundation. Ori sits in a very interesting space because this foundation is engaging the private sector, the government of Kenya, as well as the civic society to be able to ensure that change is coming to you at the community level, and this change is transformational. Both Stanbic Bank Kenya and the Stanbic Foundation have already extended 147 million to the community in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. What next for this particular foundation as we go through the end of this year and into next year? Our first interview with Mr. Charles Mudewa, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Stanbic Bank Kenya. Welcome to the show, Mr. Mudewa.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you.
All right, and congratulations on the launch of this report.
No, welcome. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay, it was very interesting listening to you. I felt like I was sitting at the feet of a maestro when it comes to Africa. Your understanding of the continent, your operations in the continent, and now looking at Kenya. When you launch this report, and you're launching this report in Kenya, what does that say to you? What does it say for Stanbic Bank in Kenya?
I think the starting point, like I said, is that it speaks to our roots being African. And it speaks to that we say Africa is our home. And in fact, Kenya is our home. And therefore, we have a long legacy and heritage in Kenya and in Africa. As we've said, we have 109 years being in Kenya. And that speaks to our roots and our legacy and the importance that we take in terms of that, and the pride that we have in terms of our legacy and then what we do in that respect.
All right. So it's a legacy that's spanning 109 years.
Yes.
What has been the motivation now to get into launching a sustainability report, launching a foundation at this point in time?
What we have realized is that as you look at corporate kind of structures, over time, I think we've tended to focus a lot more on our shareholders. But I think as we start to evolve into the future, I think the thrust around corporate business is to talk about sustainability and to look at what are we doing for the next generation. And as I've said in my statement, that the big thing for us is that we must build a sustainable business. But secondly, we must also be accountable to our communities and be able to give back to our communities with things that we do. And also just communities, but also our environment as well. So we talk about being able to be accountable to our society, being able to accommodate to economic creation impact and environmental impact.
Okay.
And that's really what we're trying to look at here.
All right. So when you are looking at this sustainability report, there's certainly a correlation with the Global Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes, it
Are
is,
there
yeah.
any particular goals that are anchored in terms of this foundation, the launch of it, as well as the report that the foundation has
I think there are a
published?
number of them.
All right.
One is that we subscribe, of course, to, we've signed the UN Code of Conduct for Responsible Banking, which guides us in terms of what we do. Then we speak about entrepreneurship and creation of jobs, which is, I think, is an important piece. We speak about gender equality, which is an important part. We spoke about health and wellness, which are important parts. So there are pieces that, and then education.
Okay.
So we tend to focus a lot more around, as we've said, entrepreneurship and job creation. We tend to focus around education, health and wellness, and gender and equality. So we tend to look at those as the ones that will drive going into the future in terms of what we need to do.
Okay, that's now the global perspective. And
Yes.
then when you come locally, you
Yeah.
are certainly aligned to the Big Four agenda
Yes.
as well as the Vision 2030.
Yes, we are that.
Now that we are in a space where COVID-19 has happened, is there a material shift in terms of how you're thinking? How do you partner with the banks, with the government? How do you partner and align yourself to the standard development goals in light of this health pandemic that's not only facing Kenya, but is also affecting the world at large?
Yes, I think we've partnered with the government in three ways, like I've indicated earlier on. The first one was actually mitigating the health risk, because I think that's the first thing we need to do. We need to all eradicate COVID, and we need to find how can we all manage the health risk. And in that respect, I think we went out of our way to bring in ventilators. We've been supporting, the production even of sanitizers by some of our clients. So we've gone out of our way to support the health risk, and of course doing responsible behavior and being part of KBA, Kenya Bankers Association, in terms of educating people around how do you manage this risk, because the prevention for this is not a tablet.
Okay.
The prevention for it is being able to sanitize and social hygiene,
Yes.
to keep distance like you and I are doing, and of course to wear masks, which we do have here.
Yes.
Just okay.
Yes.
So we have to have those in our place so that we can do that.
Okay.
The second part was about how do we help in terms of dealing with the economic impact, and which is why we're looking at how do we create businesses out of this and support businesses to weather this storm by rescheduling their loans, by giving moratoriums, and doing things that allow businesses to be able to grow even during COVID.
Okay.
And then the last piece was about poverty alleviation and social impact, which is the things that we talk about, giving people zero rated for digital transactions, that people can actually be able to create affordability and be able to continue sustaining their businesses and their homes. Of course, giving food parcels, well, which we've done with some of the money that we've gotten, and supporting the disadvantaged. So it's about working in all those aspects to try and see how we can all weather COVID and come out of it strong.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I like the way you're talking about the economic prosperity of the different stakeholders that you
Yes.
engage with,
Yes.
as well as poverty alleviation.
Yes.
You've also talked about this bank having its roots in Kenya for 109 years.
Yes.
And earlier in your speech, you also said that there's another 100 years, if not more, to
Yeah.
go.
Yes.
Therefore, the launch of the foundation is looking forward.
Yes.
Today, Mr. Mudiwa, you are a son of the African soil. You are a banker. You have worked in different regions, interacted with different bankers. What does the future for Africa look like? And especially when it comes to poverty, because to date, we've had the prosperity coming through debt in terms of banks being able to extend debt to businesses. But how does the continent then move? Does COVID-19 then present an opportunity to leapfrog, to first forward economic prosperity? Or is COVID-19 sort of like a blip that says we still continue where we were at, but how do we then begin to look at ourselves, especially in light of Africa 2063? What needs to happen, or what could happen?
I think if you look at, I love economic history.
Yes.
And if you look at economic history and ancient civilizations, the ancient civilizations started in Africa. And we talk about Egypt and all the African history. Then we moved into Europe. We then had almost the Middle East, kind of Ottoman Empire, Turkey, and all that. Then we had the Roman Empire coming up during the time Jesus was born. So we have had histories. And of course, after that, we had the Aztec in the South America.
Yes.
We had also less of that. Then, of course, we had the Chinese at some point as well, with the big Silk empires coming in, and the Japanese had their own version of it. And then, of course, we then had the US, which is currently one of the big places where we have the big leadership happening there. Now, as we start to look at, say, I think it's Africa's turn to start looking at that. And there are a lot of things that are working in Africa's favor. And I'll just give you a couple of them.
Yes, please.
One of the biggest opportunities that is given COVID has made everybody realize they need to strengthen our social infrastructure. And one of the challenges Africa has always had is social infrastructure. Our health in particular, education in secondly, has come in, and then of course the social networks. All that has been forced on us to really think about this because of COVID. We've had to redo our hospitals. I mean, even here we talk about counties now having to have 300 beds each. And now that has forced us to start thinking about our health infrastructure. So we're having to rebuild our infrastructure. Second, we've been forced to rethink about our manufacturing. Because now, initially when this thing started, we were not manufacturing this, we were importing this.
Exactly.
But right now, all this is a local product. They're coming in. Sanitizers, we were not making them. In fact, I was talking to one of our clients and they were saying to me, they were making sanitizers, but no one was buying them.
Yes.
But now we are producing those things.
Wow.
Even now, I saw a couple of weeks ago that we have young people who are producing drones during this period.
Yes.
All these things happened during the COVID period because we've all realized we need to start building our own economic base because supply lines were cut. And we realized the vulnerability which we have with global supply chains. And therefore, the focus to develop and manufacture in Africa has come up as a result of this. So we've been forced to reinvent and to remanufacture ourselves.
Wow.
I don't think we're going to go back to importing this.
No.
We are going to be producing this ourselves.
Okay.
So there's capacity that we've built during COVID that has allowed us to be able to produce things.
Okay.
I met one of our steel manufacturers the other day, and he said to me before he was competing with the world in terms of getting supplies. When the supplies were cut, all his customers said, we can supply.
Yes.
And they signed long-term contracts with them because now they all find that they can no longer trust the global supply chains.
Wow.
So while we will continue to do that, but I think the local infrastructure has been uplifted as a result of that. So Africa has benefited from that.
Okay.
The third issue that is important for Africa is population. I think we tend to understate the population dynamic. Africa, as its population grows, and it's a very young population, I think on average, Africa's population is 70% under 30. That's a very strong capital that's sitting there. If you want to call it latent capital that can generate. And it generates in three ways. Number one, it's a labor force that can actually be educated and be used to produce. Two, it's a customer base, so it creates demand. So you've got young people who are going to demand young things. If you compare with Europe, who's got an aging population, the aggregate demand is still high, but it's going down. Africa, that demand will go up as that young population starts to have their own families, buy houses, buy cars. That's aggregate demand that's sitting there. So we need to say, how do we leverage on this young population? Because that's actually going to be our market, but also going to be our labor that's going to help us produce.
Yes.
So there is that. Thirdly, resource availability. Africa is the only place which still has enough land to grow agriculture. It still has enough minerals to supply the world. So there is resource availability that can be exploited to be able to grow and see opportunities for growth. And that's what you see in Africa coming through. Now we're getting leadership coming through now. I think one of our biggest challenges has been leadership.
Yes.
Now we're getting younger leaders coming in with global perspective and being able to compete. And that's start to bring a new paradigm in Africa. And we should start to see Africa coming through and start to see growth coming through.
Okay.
If you look at global trends,
Yes.
Africa is one of the few continents in Southeast Asia that's actually showing growth above 3%. And even with COVID, the least impact in the global stage has actually been in Africa. And so we still have that ability to come out of this stronger than we were before and be able to sustain ourselves going forward.
Okay, fantastic. And just see your eyes lighting up as we're talking about this. But let me take you back a little bit. And you talked about the economic history. You've talked about the emerging opportunities in terms of COVID has actually forced us into a state of productivity rather than inertia. Now we are in the digital age, Mr. Mudiwa. When different revolutions started, it was very clear or at least from hindsight, which is always 2020, Vision 2020, it was clear what you needed to have done to have thrived. Now, today in Africa, 70%, as you have said, of the population is the youth. The infrastructure that we have was made for formal employment or to be able to accommodate a minority, which was 10, 20 years ago.
Yes.
What should the youth be focusing on today? What should SMEs be focusing on today? What should MSMEs be focusing on today to be able to leverage on digital technology and build big businesses?
I think there are a couple of things. I mean, last year actually, I was in Singapore.
Yes.
And we were actually having this conversation
Oh, wow.
at a conference that I attended there. And I was one of the speakers giving the African perspective to development.
Fantastic.
And somebody made this comment at this conference, which I found very profound. And he said, one thing that we learned in Singapore is that we have a very small population. If we are going to make an impact in the world, we have to think global. We cannot produce for Singapore because we're a small population, but we can produce for the world.
Wow.
Now, one of the things that we now need to start thinking in Africa is that we need to think of ourselves as competing globally. So while we can produce for the local market, but we must think about that the product I'm producing for the world. So, and there are a number of things that we can do. So, one is our ability to produce for the world. And that is something that we can learn to produce and do that and say, what are we competing for? Two, we do have the capability to leapfrog on our technology. A lot of the developed economies are struggling with legacy systems. We don't have that problem.
Yes.
So we can leapfrog the whole world and move on to that. If you think about M-Pesa, it was the first mobile launched in the world.
Yes.
I mean, we've had others come up now, but we have led the world in that respect. And we have many other things that we can actually lead the world and do that. So we can actually leapfrog the world in production and in digital world and leading that.
Okay.
Thirdly, we have capability to lead the world in sustainable energy. I think we tend to underestimate the ability of sustainable energy in the world because Africa is sunny. We're a sunny continent. We are a wind continent.
Yes, it is.
We are also a water continent.
Yes, it is.
So we've got the sun, the wind, and the water, which are the three elements that make the earth.
Exactly.
If you hear about
Exactly.
what people talk about.
Yes.
And we do have those three in abundance. So sustainable energy is actually a resource that Africa can produce. While other continents, for example, Europe, will freeze during winter, we don't have those extremes. So we can get solar energy throughout the whole year. We can get wind energy throughout the whole year. We can get hydro energy throughout the whole year. So we do have energy, we have resources, we've got the skills of people, and we do have the markets that we can create.
Okay. Wow. I feel like I could end it here, but I have maybe two more questions and then we can end it. Because now I want to tie up this conversation of Kenya, Africa, the world. COVID has happened. It has created immense opportunities. You do sit as a banker. You do sit as a captain of industry, engaging with governments, with the private sector, with different stakeholders, whether it's locally or globally. What are the one or two things that you think could be trigger points for different industries in Kenya, at least for the next 12 months, so that we can be able to see a medium-term growth uptake, whether it is in terms of earnings or revenue generation? And secondly, what industries are emerging or popping out at this point in time from where you sit?
I think from a trigger point of view, what we see coming in the market is, of course, as people, I think it's to enable a whole new way of being able to distribute products and create new affordability for our customers. I think that's what is critical, so that we create the demand that is required. In terms of what we need to do, I think in terms of where we need to be going forward, as we look at that, what the industries we need to look at, clearly the digital process has happened. I think a lot of us are doing digital things, communicating digitally, selling digitally. So that is a process that has happened. And I think we need to all start, as any business now, you need to think about what am I going to do in the digital space.
Okay.
Yes, we still have the physical thing, but the digital capability is now a must for any business.
Okay.
And you have to think digitally in terms of how you do your things first.
Okay.
And I think that's important.
And final one, I think just on the digital, then I can take a parting short. I know there's an entrepreneurial culture and a spirit in Kenya, and I mean, I'm one of them, starting up a company. But before COVID-19, people had learned how to harness inefficiencies and work with inefficiencies.
Yes.
So I know a guy who knows a guy who can make things done. Now in this digital age, do you get the sense that the African population is quickly providing solutions, or is the opportunity in leveraging in external platforms? For example, people who are selling goods online. I see a lot of use of Facebook, a lot of usage of Twitter, a lot of usage of Instagram for people to access markets. Are there opportunities for homegrown products in terms of platforms that enhance the efficiency and well-being of businesses today that are coming in locally?
I think they are.
Okay.
I think we have a couple of them.
Okay.
I mean, you think about the guys who are selling things, whether it's Jumia,
Okay.
Copia.
Yes.
I mean, these are all local
All right.
platforms that actually are leveraging in able to sell. But I also know, I've got a couple of people that have actually set up their own platforms,
Wow.
which they're actually selling products on.
Okay.
So there are a number of them that have come up, which are local,
All right.
which have actually come up.
Okay.
But I think what is important on the global scale, remember what I said at the beginning,
Exactly.
was that you must be able to think globally. And what COVID has also done is to give us a global reach.
Yes.
I mean, before, now right now, I just call someone and say, can we have a Zoom meeting or whatever, Teams meeting, whatever tool you're using. But it's a digital meeting.
Yes.
So I now have access to a global reach and a global platform. So I'm getting local content, but I'm also getting a global reach.
Exactly.
And that's what COVID has given us.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
Maybe you
it.
can leave us with a parting word when it comes to sustainability, the sustainability report, and launching your foundation, and what you see in terms of the outlook for the Kenyan economy, at least before the end of the year.
What I would say is that as we look into the future, I think let's just think from a point of view to say, how do I adapt to this new environment, and what must I do to ensure that I'm sustainable? I mean, the reason why we're looking at that is that we all need to make a difference. And as we have said, this is our home.
Okay.
We need to support its growth.
Fantastic.
So Kenya is our growth. We
need to support it.
Its growth.
You can't leave us without an African proverb, at least on investments, to the youth, to anybody. Yeah, and I know there are many, but we want to take one African proverb from you.
I think the African proverb I would give to us as Africans
Yes.
is one.
Okay.
And it's a Zimbabwean one. It says that until the lion tells its story, tales of hunting will always favor the hunter.
Oh, wow.
Africa needs to tell its story.
Oh, wow.
That's the only way we can succeed.
Thank you for supporting us in telling the African story. And ladies and gentlemen, I cannot add anything else. Africa needs to tell its story. This pandemic could just be the silver lining. That's the African story from Mr. Charles Mudiwa, the Chief Executive Officer of Stanbic Bank Kenya.